when you're an entrepreneur, you feel like those transformative moments, you can try anything you want. You can do anything you want in your lives. And that was a time. And I was like, I just want to turn this into something interesting for me. I just want to see if this can have any self-help or meaning in my own life. So instead of just running away, or instead of just trying to get over quickly, I turned that into something fun. And this has taught me a lesson, meaning like every time we have a failure, we can turn those failures into something useful, because there are many people who have failures. And if you can learn from the failure and actually share your failure, if you're brave enough to say what you learned from this failure, and you can turn something really bad into something really good. And in my case, it became a life mission.
I'm Srini Rao, and this is the Unmistakable Creative Podcast, where you get a window into the stories and insights of the most innovative and creative minds who've started movements, built thriving businesses, written best-selling books, and created insanely interesting art. For more, check out our 500-episode archive at unmistakablecreative.com. Jia, welcome to the Unmistakable Creative. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Hey, thank you for having me, Srini.
Yeah, my pleasure. So, it's interesting. I have seen you speak at the World Domination Summit, and somebody actually sent your story my way, and I had come across it before. And I was really intrigued, especially because I know you have a book coming out. But before we get into the book or any of that, can you tell us a bit about yourself, your story, your journey, your background, and how that has brought you to what you're up to in the world today?
Yeah, I grew up in Beijing, China, and I've always wanted was to become an entrepreneur. That was when in the early 1990s, I saw Bill Gates, and he was a big inspiration in my life. So I came to the States later on, and then just going through the American dream, like going to school, buying a house, and everything. Getting a better job and make money and all that. But really I felt I went away from my dream of being an entrepreneur. Even though I made pretty good money, I was living very comfortably, but I felt that's not what I was meant to do. So when I was 30, I quit my job. I wish I did that earlier, but you got to do that sooner or later, right? So when I quit my job when I was 30, I started my own company. And that's where I met this fate of rejection. I got rejected with an investment. And I felt so bad that I almost wanted to quit when I got rejected. And the thing is, this brought up all these past feelings that I had in my life, where every time I feel like I was about to do something, I was so afraid to be rejected by someone, and that I just kept telling myself not to do it. And then sometimes when I just got a little rejection, whether that's someone telling me my idea wasn't good, I would just quit. Because I thought if someone told me, that must be true. This is where it came to me. I found this is a big problem in my life. I cannot be dictated by this fear of rejection anymore. Otherwise, do you think Bill Gates would quit after a simple rejection from an investor? No way. So no matter what I do, whether that's being an entrepreneur or having a career, I have to overcome this fear of rejection. So this became my thing. Mm-hmm. So, after that, I started my blog. It's called 100 Days of Rejection. If you're interested, you can go to fearbuster.com to look at the blog. I started this about 2 years ago, where every day I would go out and look for rejection instead of running away from it. And I would record my rejection attempts, and I made a video blog about it. And the thing is, it started as a side pet project because just overcome my fear and I was having fun with it. Then it turned to be pretty big because a lot of people start writing me emails and telling me that, hey, what you're doing is inspiring, because they also had this fear of rejection. So now this has turned from a side project or some thing for myself into a life mission where I can help others overcome their fear of rejection.
All right. So we're going to get into all of that and talk about that in more detail. But, I want to go back to something that you said earlier about quitting your job. And you just said, you got to do it sometime, right? I think that somehow we get into our heads that there is going to be a perfect time to do all these things that we want to do with our lives. And I'm really interested in what enabled you to do that. And then, what it is that keeps people from taking the leap into things that they're uncertain about, and, how they overcome that fear.
That's a very interesting point, because we do always feel like, there's a time that will come. I had this conversation with a lot of people before I quit my job. Before, people kept telling me, yeah, you should just do this. Maybe you can be better at your career. Maybe you can make this, take this step. Maybe once you become a leader of certain amount of people, like if you, maybe you can have manage over 15 people. Now you have experience. Maybe you make a certain amount of money. Now you have all the savings for you to do this. The thing is, that number keeps changing. I just feel like, a lot of times the time should be now. And because it's throughout my life, I just kept telling me that same story, but with different goals. It used to be if you go to business school, then you can become entrepreneur. It used to be once you find a job for a couple of years, you can become entrepreneur. It used to be once you save maybe $50,000, you can have I always told myself those, but that day never came until that my son was born. I became a parent, and that was a life-changing moment where I felt, wow, usually this is where people quit. Of having those dreams. It's, you're a parent now, just stop worrying about those dreams and focus on your career and provide for your family and things like that. But this is I didn't want my son to become my excuse of not pursuing my dream. So maybe someday I would come to him saying, hey son, I didn't do my dream, I didn't pursue my dream because of you. That's the worst thing to say. What I want to do is, hey son, you were my catalyst of my entrepreneurship dream. Because of you were born, I started pursuing my dream, so I can be an example to you. Now you can go chase after yours.
It's interesting. That story reminds me of a scene from a movie. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called The Rookie with Dennis Quaid, and he's a baseball player.
Great movie. Movie.
And there's this very distinctive scene where his wife comes to him and says, okay, stay and pitch for one more week. And she said, what kind of message are we sending to that kid who looks up to you if we tell you to quit?
Absolutely. And that's a lot of times we make those excuses because of our kid, but those are not the excuses are not solid excuses. It's because we are afraid, because we want to quit, so we use noble reasons to quit. But the best reason is to keep going, and because you want to be an example.
Yeah. So how do you make the shift from using noble reasons to quit to actually taking action?
It's where, as I mentioned, I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and I had too many excuses. And then that's where it's either now or never. Because I felt if I couldn't become entrepreneur, if I couldn't do the entrepreneur thing when I was 18 years old, like some sort of whiz kid, or maybe 23 years old, just right out of college, or after graduate school, I was 27 or 28 as a single guy, or even just as a married person. If I couldn't do all that, and at those easier times in my life, when you hear a lot of this on TV or in newspapers or on magazines, that's how people became entrepreneurs. If you couldn't do that at those age, and now you have a kid on the way, and you are 30, and you're pretty soon you're 35 or 40, how can you justify that? Mm-hmm. So it's really, there's that urgency for me to feel like this is now or never.
Well, let's do this. I want to ask you an interesting question before we get into the entire 100 days of rejection. One of the things that really fascinates me is that you looked at something like getting rejected by, investors, something that most of us would consider a failure and most of us would take sort of badly, and you transformed that into just this massive opportunity and into a life mission. So my question is how to learn to recognize moments that seem like they're really bad and turn them into something as wonderful as what you have.
It's a really insightful question, because when it actually happened, it was just all bad, right? But it's where it's almost like the same thing as my having a kid, right? I mean, having a kid is a good thing, but the thing is that because of having a kid, I felt that my dreams was slipping away from me, and that's almost a bad thing. So I turned that into a good thing by taking action. So it's the same thing here. When I was hit with this rejection, I was hurt, but I felt I could either just I could do one of a few things. I could just sulk and quit, or I could just try to move on. That's what I mean. That's what most people would do. They would try to probably move on and try to move on to the next thing as quickly as possible. But I felt that this has some bigger meaning in my life. I mean, it's almost like a maybe of a microcosm of my life, where I would hit with rejection, and then I would just start running. So this is a moment when you're an entrepreneur, you feel like those transformative moments, you can try anything you want. You can do anything you want in your lives. And that was a time. And I was like, I just want to turn this into something interesting for me. I just want to see if this can have any self-help or meaning in my own life. So instead of just running away, or instead of just trying to get over it quickly, I turned that into something fun. And this has taught me a lesson, meaning like every time we have a failure, we can turn those failures into something useful, because there are many people who have failures. And if you can learn from the failure and actually share your failure, if you're brave enough to say what you learned from this failure, and you can turn something really bad into something really good. And in my case, it became a life mission.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this. On that note, 2 questions. What do you think separates the person who looks at a failure and turns it into an opportunity like you have, and turns it into a life mission, versus the one who doesn't? Because I can tell you, I've often been the person who doesn't in some very, very difficult failures.
I think having that awareness and intentionality is a big thing. Mm-hmm. It is really a big thing. It's not something that I went through plenty of failures in my life, but looking back, they all have some sort of made some purpose, had some purpose, to the bigger picture. I'm not saying this as a kind of a revisionist history, but really felt that way, when I look back. So I think having a big life mission, having a big meaning in your life, that is a big overarching story that you want to write. I mean, it's not a story that have been written already, but it's a story that you want to write for your life. And that's when you can start piecing everything together, that was your past, your current, your presence or your future, that they all become part of a story. And it is up to you. It's almost like an author to turn those things into part of a big book. I love how Steve Jobs did this, in his address to Stanford, the commencement speech. He looked back and saying, all his times, how he became an adopted kid, how he didn't finish college, they all contributed to his success or his story later on. So I think having that meaning in life and that big overarching goal is super important to have, so we can turn these failures into something useful.
Okay. So 2 questions. One, how do you sort of shift the awareness and intentionality so that you can actually get the valuable lessons from them? And, I know sometimes you don't get them when they happen. Like you said, sometimes you only get them, when you look back. And then the other thing is that you've kind of brought up this idea of the bigger meaning of your life multiple times in our conversation. How did you, it sounds like you uncovered that through a series of experiences, but how do people uncover what that bigger meaning and bigger purpose might be based on your experience?
These are very big questions. The first one is, how do you actually do this, right? How do you see this failures in meaning, right? Mm-hmm. So I think having a mindset was very important. I'm not sure you're familiar with this book called Mindset.
Yep, by Carol Dweck.
Yes, it's a wonderful book. The book talks about how elastic our mind could be, or our ability or talent can be. So if we have this growth mindset, we can that becomes a lot easier. Or like, instead of saying this failure defines me, we say it's our reaction to the failure that defines us. So by having that growth mindset, meaning everything, you can turn anything that happens into something useful if you have that right mindset. So, so I think, it's really crucial to have that mindset. And secondly, what's your second question again? I'm sorry.
So, we've talked about mindset, but, finding the sort of bigger purpose and meaning of your life. I mean, you found it through this, and I realize it's a very big question. I don't expect you to have a concrete answer for it, but it's something I'm very curious about. I mean, based on your experiences, how would you suggest people go about finding that sort of bigger meaning and purpose of their life?
So in my case, I can only talk about my experience. My feeling was, this is something I wanted to do since I was little, right? And that dream did not go away. It only became stronger and stronger as time goes on. So having that thought, we all had dreams. I mean, I think most of us has dreams growing up, whether that's to become the president, or maybe rocket scientist, just kind of these classic dreams. But if those dreams don't go away, that's telling us about something. That's telling us about maybe we should do something about it instead of having an excuse of not pursuing the dream, however far-fetched, however unrealistic they seem. But, most people are not meant to have their dreams, meaning, they probably excuse themselves or not, they probably, the talent is not there. But if after a certain amount of time it's still there, and after a certain amount of failures and after frustrations, you feel like you can still handle it and the dream is still there, that's where I feel it's worth pursuing that meaning.
All right. Well, let's do this. Let's shift gears a bit and let's start talking about the whole concept of 100 Days of Rejection, because I know you have some really, really funny stories. I've heard some of these. And I'd love for you to talk to us about sort of, coming up with the project and then starting it and, walk us through the journey of that entire project.
So this is where I've never known blogging. Like I read some blogs, but in here and there, but more like articles. But I didn't know the concept of blogging at all until I started doing this. And I wrote one blog post. I posted on Hacker News. That's before my rejection. That was during my once I was running my company, and I found people were engaging because I touched on a subject that was universal. I talked about the right age for being an entrepreneur, because I felt maybe I was too old and as a 30-year-old. And then I felt a lot of people started writing me back and commenting on it. And that's a great way to actually connect with people. And so when this rejection happened, I thought, why not turn that into a blog as well? Maybe I can connect with the world that way. And hey, if I can drive some traffic to my website because of because of that, I need users for my app, for the app I was building. That's just as good. But more importantly, this was something that was meaningful to me, and so it was meaningful to me. I really didn't care if people found that interesting or not, because if it's meaningful to me, that's good enough. So that's what I did. I started blogging on. I started recording every single rejection I had. I started blogging about it. I blogged about what I learned on each rejection attempts, and then it just got bigger and bigger.
So let's get into specifics, because it sounds like you kind of kept leveling up the level of risk in every single thing you did, and I'd like you to walk us through that entire process.
So yeah, it was at the beginning. I searched online. I found, the whole concept of rejection therapy was, it wasn't new. It wasn't mine. It was by this guy named Jason Comley. He's a Canadian guy. He invented this game about looking for rejection so you can desensitize yourself from the pain. So I said I'm gonna put my own spin on it. All right. I don't like other people telling me what to do. I'll just come up with my own rejection attempts. Mm-hmm. And then I would blog. So the first day I asked to borrow $100 from a stranger. It was a security guard guy. It was a pretty big guy. And I just felt I was so scared when I approached him. every step was just felt ominous. And when I asked and I said, "Can I borrow $100 from you?" The guy raised his head and he said, "No, why?" Then I just start running. I said, I'm sorry, bye," and I ran away. And that it felt like literally like life and death. I know it wasn't, but it felt like it.
Sure.
So that night I saw my own video because I recorded this, and I saw how scared I was. I was like this guy on Sixth Sense, right? I mean, the kid on Sixth Sense. I saw dead people, and I thought, wow, why was I so scared? And this guy didn't look that menacing, actually. And he actually asked me why. He was intrigued by my request. I could have just extended my conversation with him and explained myself, but I didn't do all that. I just started running. That's all because I was scared. And this felt like my life was like that. Every time I asked something, I got rejected. I just run away. So, next day, I said, no matter what happens, I would not run. So the next day I went to like Five Guys Burger and asked them to make, for a burger refill. It's mainly like, they are like, "What's a burger refill?" And I said, "Well, just like, I just finished a burger you had, and can you give me a refill of a burger instead of a drink?" And the guy was like perplexed. He was like, "No, we don't do that." And I even said, "Well, can you tell your manager, this is a great feedback for you guys. I would love you more if you do burger refill." And he's like, "Sure, I'll do it." And so, but I walked away a lot better this time. I felt better just because I did not run. It's a valuable lesson I learned, that never just run. Every time you run, you're actually exposed to your own like shame and feeling of failure if you run. But if you stay there, you walk out a winner usually. So this is my second day and third day, and this is a thing I will stop here. But the third day is that everything changed, where I went to a Krispy Kreme and asked for a donuts that looked like Olympic rings. And this time I was like, "Yeah, just give me my no. I want to hear the no. I want to joke about it. I want to stay there." But the thing is, the person took me so seriously. The donut maker, and she took the time to write down what the color looked like, and eventually she came up with a way to make the donuts, and it was amazing, and I couldn't believe what it was like, to have that type of customer service experience, and I did. And just the human kindness that was shown in that video, in that experience, was what just blew me away. This is where so that video went viral, and this is where I found, okay, I need to stop worrying about getting a yes or a no. I need to worry about just asking more and more outrageous things. I just want to see what happens. I want the world to tell me yes and no instead of me chasing after it. So this is almost like a life-changing moment for me.
So I don't know about you, but vacuuming is not one of those things that I ever look forward to doing. But as you know, your environment has a huge impact on your creativity. So I still like it to be clean wherever I'm living and working. But now it doesn't have to be something that you deal with. If you're like me and you grew up in the 80s, you probably fantasized about the day when cleaning your house would be like it was for the Jetsons, meaning you don't have to lift a finger. Well, the good news is that we're already kind of living in that future. And the easiest way to make sure your floors are clean every day is with the iRobot Roomba Robot Vacuum. It cleans up after itself. The Clean Base automatic dirt disposal takes convenience to a new level, automatically empties its own bin into an allergen lock bag that holds 60 days of debris and traps 99% of pollen, mold, and dust mites, so you can forget about vacuuming for months at a time. Let the Roomba clean for you instead. It learns your home, finds dirt, and empties itself on its own. It's got powerful cleaning performance made effortless. Remember, if it's not from iRobot, it's not a Roomba. To learn more, go to irobot.com/unmistakable. So, okay, so this is really, really interesting, and I love the fact that this was such a life-changing moment, because it like listening to say that, I'm like, okay, that doesn't sound like such a big deal, but it really, it's funny because it seems like with each little thing, you're teaching your brain whole new lessons about rejection. So let me ask you this. Talk to me about some of the more audacious things that you started to ask for. And then what I actually want to do is start to talk about how it started to change you as a person and what this does inside the human brain. Because I can't help but start wanting to talk about neuroplasticity, even though neither of us are neuroscientists.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, there's one that's the smaller things. One day I went into knock on someone's doors. I wanted to plant a flower in his backyard. And the guy said, no. But instead of running away, I asked him why. And he said, what you're offering is cool. I mean, but I can't have it because I have a dog that would dig up everything in my backyard. So, if you want, you can go across the street to Lauren's house, and Lauren loves flowers. So I did, and half an hour later, I did plant a flower in Lauren's backyard, and she couldn't be happier. And this is where I learned. I learned some extremely valuable lessons here. One is, a lot of times I just want to, I felt like I need to convince everyone to like me, to want my idea. Mm-hmm. So I wasted a lot of time doing that. But sometimes it's just me need to find the right person who desperately wanted what I had to offer. And then this is where I also learned I could ask why, and standing there ask why and turn and find the underlying reason for the rejection. And in fact, just and it wasn't because I wasn't trustworthy. It wasn't because I looked weird or whatever, but it was because what I offered did not fit his needs. And so he trusted me enough to offer me a referral, using sales term. Actually converted. So these are just learning moments for me that not only like I learned, but also I became bolder and bolder. I just felt I can experiment on all these things. I can try all these techniques that I usually learn on books and I read it somewhere. I can practice here over and over again because I got 100 of these.
Let me ask you this: what misperceptions do we as adults develop about failure or about rejection in particular that keep us from doing all of the things that we'd like to do? Because you mentioned one of them is that we just don't happen to want what this or have what this other person wants. But I'm really interested in the misperceptions and the lessons that you have learned about that in addition to what you just shared.
I think we thought of rejection we just think rejection is bad. Mm-hmm. That's in general, right? It's some sort of obstacle, it's some sort of something we have to overcome, we have to forget about. But actually, I learned rejection is not necessarily a bad thing. Mm-hmm. If we can learn how to handle rejection, we can turn them into something very positive. We can actually learn from rejection. And also, if the old saying says, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger," right? It's really true. And these rejections never kill us, and they always make us stronger if we let them to. Mm-hmm. It's like we have this comfort zone that's pretty set, but if we put ourselves outside this comfort zone by getting rejected once at a time, we're expanding our comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And gradually we can ask, things that we wouldn't dare before and do things we wouldn't dare before. And it's kind of amazing. It's like our mental courage is like a muscle. It's not something that's either born with or not, but something we can just use rejection as an exercise tool to learn from. And I had no idea these were the case, but now I can do it. In fact, I'm actually building something in like online gym. It's called a rejection gym. Just doing that, having people go through rejections one at a time, going through this 100 days, and afterward they can start asking things they didn't even dream of.
So let me ask you this. This is actually a very out of personal curiosity question.
Sure.
One of the things I think that many of us do is that we take rejection very personally, especially in the context of something like a romantic situation or, something that has to do with the opposite sex or in social interactions in particular, I think.
Sure.
To me, going and asking, the person at Del Taco for some ridiculous order, that doesn't seem like such a big deal. I'm like, okay, whatever. You don't take that personally because there isn't like a social stigma tied to it, but our cultural conditioning and sort of just our evolution when it comes to rejection from other human beings in the context of social interaction, I think it's very, very complex not to take it personally. And I'm really interested in hearing your perspective on this.
So a couple of things. One is, that feeling of personal rejection is actually deep-rooted in our DNA. When our ancestors were like hunters and gatherers, they weren't the fastest or strongest, but we succeeded in become hunters because we were, one, pretty smart, and two, we actually collaborated with each other in a very tight-knit groups. If we get rejected by other people, that means sometimes we're out there on our own, facing these animals. And that literally meant life and death. That's why that feeling of life and death, of fear, is still with us when we're getting rejected by other people. Mm-hmm. So there's a biological or maybe evolutionary explanation to why we take this so personally, and we're so afraid of this. So, but I learned that I never take things personally anymore. I used to a lot because I'm so used to rejection, right. Small things, big things, and it's. We sometimes think there's a big disconnect between the smaller things that didn't matter to the big things that actually matter. But it was actually, for me, all practice. I was like, when I say Kobe Bryant or maybe LeBron James, when we're seeing them as so good on the court, but they practice a lot. The games are not won because they were more talented than everyone on the court, but it's because they practice a lot in the dark gyms at night, and making jump shots and free throws. So when the game is on the line, when something really matters to them that they were doing, those muscle memories and those calmness all came back through practice. So I use small rejections or trivial rejections to get myself ready to big rejections, so I can handle them the same way. And it has manifested in my life and business as well. Right now I conduct my business in a completely different way. Just I embrace rejection all the time. Every time I start a project, I tell myself, how many no's can I take? How many rejections can I do before I give up? Usually, the number is pretty high, and more than often, long before I run through that number of rejections, my goal would be reached.
That's interesting. I love that you brought up the biological and evolutionary piece, and I guess the question for me is, through this process, can we overcome our own biology?
I think we can. I really think. It's just like so is our size of our muscle. That's also biology. Some people are naturally stronger than others. But if we exercise, it's guaranteed that we'll all become stronger than we were before. We're not saying we'll all become Michael Jordans of rejection, but we can compare to ourselves. And maybe a few months ago or a year ago, we can become Michael Jordans in our own world compared to ourselves.
So. Let's do this. Tell me about some of the bigger, crazier things you started to ask for as you started to build this rejection muscle, and how it started to transform you as a person and how you felt about yourself.
Yeah. So one example was I one day, I used to live in Austin, Texas. That's when this whole 100 days of rejection happened. I went to the UT Austin, University of Texas in Austin. I knock on the professor's door, and then he opened the door, and I just asked him, "Can I teach your class?" and he thought at first he thought I was trying to sell him something, but I sat down and he said, "I'll give you 5 minutes, to say whatever you want to say to me." Then I sat down, I pulled out my iPad. I actually prepared for my lecture already before I went in, because I said, people are probably going to say no to me, but you know what? I'm going to act as if they would say yes. I would prepare for this lecture. So I showed him what I would teach. It's about entrepreneurship. It's about overcoming the failure and things I knew the best, the most. And he was impressed. He's like, actually, I think I can fit you into my curriculum. So a couple months later, he invited me to give a guest lecture to his students, and it was very well received. Just walking out of there, I would just thought, I will always want to do this. This is like my lifelong dream, to be able to teach a class to college students. I'm come from a family of teachers. It's almost like fulfilling my family legacy. But I used to think I would have to accomplish so much. Maybe I have to be on the news, a newspaper cover, a magazine cover. I have to be on TV, so people would take me seriously. People would know what I had. I have something to offer. But no, this time I just asked, and it turned out he wanted and needed what I had to say. So, this is a big life, it's like a lifelong dream just fulfilled just like that. It came too quickly. And I said, if there's things like this, I can just ask. What else shouldn't I ask? What else, if I knew I prepared well, if I knew I treated seriously, if I knew I was respectful, if I knew I wanted bad enough, I should ask anything I want without thinking that someone would reject me or something. Maybe this would be too silly.
All right. Well, let's do this. Let's talk about how people can start to apply this in their own lives, because that's what this book is really about, right? Is how we ourselves can become rejection proof. And to me, as I'm listening to this, I can't help but think this would be incredibly valuable for almost anybody, because it seems like it doesn't matter how big of a thing it is that you attempt to get rejected at. It's simply just conditioning yourself for getting rejected.
Absolutely. There's the learning part, but also the exercising part. Those two parts come hand in hand. But it's always more important for us to just feel, we're okay to get rejected. We actually want to get rejected in some way, just to toughen myself up. So if you want to make some change in your life and try to apply these principles, I just start something small. Go to Office Depot when you buy paper next time. Negotiate some sort of a discount. People never do that. Especially when you're at a big box office. Stores. People don't negotiate. They're just like, it is what it is. But why not? Why not negotiate? And you'll probably be turned down. But have fun. Stay engaged and try to find ways so you can offer something them in return to get that yes. Or maybe next time you walk into a Starbucks, go try to buy some coffee beans or something. Buy something you don't normally buy, not the coffee, but something that in the back, buy some spoons, or maybe just ask for something free. You're not offending anyone by making these small requests, and make it clear that they can say no. Like this is you're asking for something that probably don't normally do, but you're still asking anyway. But gradually you will be amazed by how these interactions turn out to be. Maybe you won't get a yes, but they're always fine, and no matter how you get rejected or even laughed at, you have to know your life will not materially change before and after your rejection. So once you understand that, the world becomes your playground. You can do anything you want.
I love that. Let me ask you this. So, we've talked quite a bit about, how much your own life has changed. It's led you to all these amazing things, like getting to write this book, a video that goes viral, a wildly popular blog. Talk to me about how the lives of other people who've come into contact with this work have changed because of your own mission.
Yeah, that's something I'm really, really excited about, because I've seen this in the rejection gym I'm building. This is precisely what it is for. It's for people who also have this fear of rejection, or sometimes they maybe not rejection, but they just fear failure, fear wasting time. There's a lot of fears in people's mind that are so limiting to us. So we use rejection as a tool to exercise. And so I haven't started this for long, but in just a few weeks I started. I've seen people they say, wow, they really changed. They're asking stuff they've never asked before. I've seen people start asking for jobs that they felt they were not qualified for. There's one example where there's one guy who was in sales for a long time, and he became really good at it. But he never wanted to try anything else. He wanted to, but he was like, this is the one thing I'm good at in life. And if I step out, maybe I won't be good at, and maybe, I just don't want that risk. And then, he saw my video, he started chatting with me, I was helping him through some of this. So he just went out and asked for a job that he didn't feel he was qualified for. It's a completely new career direction with this company. And pretty soon, not only he got the job, and he was really good at the job, and pretty soon he started a new entrepreneurial center for that Fortune 100 company in UK. So these are just one example. That was pretty outrageous, to me, that just because you get over this mental hurdle that you can, just kind of shoot for the stars, and you never know what's going to happen. But the thing is, when you do that, I'm not guaranteed that you will get what you want, or anyone will get what they want. But one thing is, they're going to be at a better place when they do this. They're going to be closer to their dreams than they were before.
Well, I really, really actually appreciate that you brought up that distinction, that it's not going to necessarily lead to what you want per se, but it will get you that much closer. I think that what you're talking about would fundamentally alter somebody's personality for the better. and make them much stronger. Like, I can't help but think that, okay, 100 days of asking for things that I get rejected at would completely change the association that I have with rejection to something completely different. As, okay, I asked for something, somebody said no.
Yep.
Like, it seems like it would depersonalize the whole thing significantly.
Absolutely. And just then, absolutely. And also it free us from this results thing. We really want results. And sometimes that's why we labor so hard trying to position ourselves to try to get that result. If you go on LinkedIn, you see results oriented is one of the big buzzwords everyone uses. Somehow they're all, because they bring results. But the thing is, I found, shooting for results actually a lot of times limit yourself, limit your creativity, limit your action, and make you fearful. And if I just start focusing on actions, just ask, just go out and try to learn new things and keep doing it. Go. And that way, I not only I became better at what I was doing and became more confident, having more fun, but usually it led to better results because of the confidence and the actions I was making.
Well, I think that's really interesting you say that, and I will share one personal story about something very similar. I set a goal a long time ago to sell 1,000 copies of a book, and I thought there's no way. It took me a long time to actually strangely give up that goal, because I thought, okay, I have no control over how many people are going to buy my book, and if I keep trying to write a book that is designed to sell 1,000 copies, I'm going to kill my creativity. And then I blew that number out of the water in a way that I never expected I would, because I realized it was like, okay, I can control writing the book, I can control publishing the book, and that's it. And the rest, is kind of left in the hands of fate. And of course, it ended up being a much better book because of that. Exactly.
That's the approach when I was writing my book as well. Just forget about the results of how many books you're trying to sell. Just write a good book and let it. And I mean, of course, do the hardest as you can to promote the book and market the book,
right?
And tell people about it. But in the end, there's an old Chinese saying, strategy is based on people, and results is based on God. In the end, it's really let the God or universe or whatever to decide your fate.
Well, I think that makes a really, really beautiful way to wrap up our conversation. Jia, I have one last question for you.
Sure.
What do you think it is that makes somebody or something unmistakable?
It's a fantastic question. The unmistakable thing is, if people can argue with what's best, what's what they need or something. One thing they cannot mistake is how much you want something. What you want in your life. What you want in this. They cannot argue with that, because that's what you want. You own that. You own your own story. You own your own actions. So when you go out and tell people your story to live your life, that's, you own that thing and live that to the full. And no matter what other people say, because they can't argue with what you want and what you need.
Well, Jia, this has been just absolutely fantastic. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to join us and share some of your story and your insights with our listeners here at the Unmistakable Creative. And we will link up everything that we've talked about in the show notes, including some of the videos that we've talked about, as well as a link to Jia's book.
All right. Thank you, Srini.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun. This is a great interview.
Well, thank you. And for those of you listening, we will wrap the show with that. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Unmistakable Creative Podcast. While you were listening, were there any moments you found fascinating, inspiring, instructive, maybe even heartwarming? Can you think of anyone, a friend or a family member who would appreciate this moment? If so, take a second and share today's episode with that one person, because good ideas and messages are meant to be shared.